Hello, and welcome to this Government Technology virtual Q&A. I'm Zach Patton, the Chief Editor for the Content Studio here at Government Technology. And today I'm joined by Maggie Hallbach, the Vice President of Business Development for the Public Sector at Verizon. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Zach. A pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So let's start the conversation today the same way pretty much we're starting every conversation these days, which is about the pandemic. And kind of the impact of that, specifically here around state and local government. What are the areas of state and local government where you've seen the greatest transformation as a result of the pandemic?
You know, it's funny. I don't really actually like to start conversations about that anymore because what we're really seeing is government moving to agility, to flexibility, to scalability. And for those of us that have been in government or serving government for a long time, we've talked a lot about this in the past. And what we've seen is necessity bred some invention, a lot of invention, in fact. And we've moved a lot of applications to a virtualized environment. We also allowed a lot of government workforces to do something we never contemplated they would do, which is work from home. And that really introduced a recognition that you can have a remote workforce and that you do have the technology to provide citizen services, critical services to your constituents and your end users in a virtual environment. And so that's really what we've seen is this movement to flexibility and scalability within the operations of government, whether that's departments of labor, tax, DMVs, health and human services, the list goes on and on.
Yeah, and I like that the way of thinking about it. It is this movement toward just greater agility and flexibility that maybe the pandemic accelerated, but you're right, it's something that we've been talking about for a while. So within that environment, how can governments kind of ensure that they're communicating correctly? You know, you talked about kind of that hybrid environment, both for, constituents accessing services as well as employees needing to communicate with each other and collaborate with each other. Talk a little bit about the role of communication in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen is communication and communication technology is probably more important now than ever. And it's really the consumerization of communication. So when we look at some of our younger generations, they are very comfortable with video communication. I know there were periods of time in the not so distant past where a lot of us were uncomfortable with video communication, video conferencing. There was some kind of weirdness about inviting people into their houses, right?
Yeah.
Me coming to you, I'm inviting you into my house. But for our younger generations, this is how they communicate. The other thing is texting and short message. This comfort level with being able to communicate maybe in 256 characters. It's really around, I want to be able to communicate where I need to, when I need to, how I need to. And that has actually been driven by this kind of new way of working. So there's a just-in-time approach. We deployed a lot of solutions for states to actually communicate where to get COVID tests. We also deployed through short message communication the status of unemployment claims. So being able to provide information and serving it up in small bite-sized chunks to constituents when they needed it, and obviously when they needed it most, but then also providing richer communication internally for operational organizations that were now in a virtual environment, being able to have the richness of a high quality video communication and having that integrated in with other communication types, integrated with your email, integrated with your messaging platform, whether you were using, Jabber or MS Teams or even Slack. Having that level of integration and presence. Am I available? Am I on a call or in another meeting? Am I in a do not disturb setting? And setting your own boundaries to ensure that you can actually be as productive as possible. So we saw a whole way of changing how we orchestrate our communication with each other, whether that was internally amongst agencies or within an agency, and then out as we were communicating with constituents, with citizens, critical information, and then maybe more just updates and status type of information.
Yeah, I like that point about just sort of, setting boundaries and kind of conveying your presence. I think that's something we've all put a lot of thought into. Something else that I think has kind of paralleled this shift is digital services, right? It's something that, again, we've been talking about with governments kind of moving services online and offering more digital access for those services for 20 years. But it's also something that has been greatly accelerated over the past couple of years. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what's really driving that push for digital services and kind of the role of self-service for constituents?
Yeah, so as we saw in the 2021 state CIO survey published by Grant Thornton and conducted by the NASCIO, National Association of State CIOs Association, 74% of state CIOs said that a better online experience for citizens was the biggest driver for them to go digital. And again, we can talk about the Amazon effect. This idea of flexibility, this idea of instantaneous experience or instantaneous satisfaction, it obviously has to convey to what we expect out of government. And so when we think about the types of services that our citizens need from their governments, access to affordable housing, access to affordable healthcare, those are critical pieces. But there are also some kind of more mundane pieces like, why has my trash not been picked up in 2 weeks? Or is there a snow emergency on my route, so I need to move my car? Those kinds of things can often be more effectively conveyed out to citizens through digital forums. And as I mentioned earlier, we have to also have the generational mindset of how do generations or different generations want to receive information. And we've got to be catering to those generational differences. So certain generations might want to hear a voice and talk to someone. Other generations might say, I don't have time for that. I just want to go out to the site or get to a link and get that information served up to me proactively. So one of the things that we think about is what are the most routine types of transactions that are occurring between a citizen and government? And how can we work with government to automate as many of those transactions so that those constituents that enjoy self-service most have the ability to consume information literally 24/7 when they need it, whether it's benefit eligibility or where I am in an application process or how do I pay a fee or a license. Those are the kinds of things that you can very easily turn into a digitized experience. And then leaving the higher complexity touch points for those human interventions where you need to have more of that one-on-one experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you think about kind of both of these buckets, right, the constituent facing services, as well as kind of that remote employee telework environment that we're all in now to some degree. What are some of the technologies that you've really seen kind of make a real impact in that you really think are going to stay?
Yeah, I think the first one is really the whole kind of cloud enabled contact center experience. So whether you're talking about a 311 type of interaction, whether you're talking about contacting an unemployment office to file a claim or check on a claim status, whether you're thinking about applying for healthcare, Medicare through a state program. These are the kinds of solutions that historically have been very equipment intensive, right? Premise based, lots of equipment, lots of infrastructure, lots of management and maintenance of that equipment and infrastructure. And what we're seeing is a lot of these applications are moving out of premise-based boxes that are managed by state IT employees, moving those to a cloud environment where they're still managed by IT state employees, but in a far more agile and cloud adopted type of way. And it allows them to be what I would say a better supplier to their end agencies. So for instance, change requests for scalability on a platform in a cloud environment are far more nimble. You can scale up and scale down some of these virtual machines in a matter of minutes rather than thinking about days and hours. And what we've recently seen is with some of these supply chain challenges, having the ability to not need to wait for equipment shipments in order to scale a contact center infrastructure has proven to be a tremendous benefit to a lot of these agencies that are taking advantage of these cloud-based contact center applications. So we have the ability to support these agents remotely. The agents can actually, through their supervisor skilling, make some changes dynamically themselves. They have the ability to scale up and scale down to support seasonality or volume surges. They have the ability to do IVR changes. So when you call into one of these environments, the ability to make dynamic changes to some of the messaging, for instance, that you hear when you call. The ability to integrate some of these solutions with things like social media listening apps. So for instance, if there is a new kind of trend that they're picking up in social media, having the ability to then make changes on the automation to support new questions. As many of us saw with the Department of Labor, a lot of these new employment benefits were changing very dynamically. And there were new rules and regulations that were coming within each of these new employment benefit programs. And so having the ability to be very agile and changing was super critical. The second area was really around remote work. And that was really where we saw the big push into the collaboration platforms. So right now we're coming to you over Zoom, but another one was, MS Teams and the Microsoft integrations there. And then obviously with Cisco's WebEx, Verizon's BlueJeans. So there were lots of different platforms that constituents could leverage, but that the remote workforce could also leverage. And so this gave these remote workers an opportunity to be productive at home at the same time that we were able to keep that social distancing underway. And what I would say is we're already seeing that a lot of these states have the ability to retain the ability for their employees to continue to work from home, which obviously improves their work quality, their flexibility within their job. And so it's important for our state governments to be able to retain the talent that they have within their ranks.
The other thing that strikes me about what you're saying, at least on the consumer side, the constituent side, is when you talk about kind of that cloud-based contact center model. I think that helps really move toward what we've been talking about for a long time in government, which is, constituents who are trying to access services may not know what department they're looking for, right? They just know that they need this benefit or that they need to access this service, or maybe there are services they don't even know they qualify for, right? This sort of no
Right.
wrong door idea. And it seems like you're saying that this kind of helps push toward that as well, right?
Absolutely. So this actually will get to maybe another area around identity. But one of the things, if I can go there, that has often plagued states and local government is this idea of, do I know who you are, and do I know what you need and what you're eligible for? Right. And one of the things that cloud enabling a lot of these solutions helps part of the piece, which is I now can create an enterprise-wide cloud platform that I can then customize for the use cases for each of the agency's requirements. Because what the Department of Labor may need is going to be different than your Department of Motor Vehicles may need versus your Child and Family Services might need. Those are all going to be very unique use cases. The platform can be uniform, but the manner in which you set up your skilling, your routing, your messaging, your self-service options, your validation of who am I talking to, that then allows you to customize within that specific use case. And it actually minimizes the amount of cost that the state has to incur, because you're building a uniform platform and then you're only customizing to the specific use cases within each of the agency's requirements.
Yeah. So, since you brought up identity, I think it's impossible to talk about kind of the advantages of greater digital services and easier kind of single sign-on identity for constituents without also talking about some of the cybersecurity challenges that come with that. So how do you balance that, the need for streamlining that customer experience while also maintaining security and fighting fraud and all those necessary things?
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, the state CIO top 10 priorities for 2022 out of NASCIO's report, digital government and digital services is number 2 behind cybersecurity and risk management. And, it's this healthy tension that you've got between cyber and the risk. I mean, you can't open a newspaper without hearing about some ransomware attack. And so the ability to make sure that you know who in fact you're talking to is really who you think you're talking to or who you're transacting with. And when I say talk, I don't necessarily mean verbally, I mean digitally. Are you really who you say you are? And the other piece that is really important is also not making it so overwhelming that the cybersecurity slows down the ability for the agency to do its mission. Because many of these agencies are doing life critical missions. And so one of the key things to think about is to plumb, like a plumbing, to plumb security into your solutions from the get-go. It's almost like when you construct a building, you don't want to retrofit your plumbing after the fact, right? So when you think about cyber at the start of your design of your solutions, that then helps you make sure that you're going to have it designed in mind. And so one of the things that we think about is your layers of defense and the manner with which you do endpoint security, which is really critical because many of your agents or constituents are connected to some endpoint. It could be something as simple as this mobile phone. Or it could be some device like a laptop, all the way back into the network, the infrastructure, the applications. But then it could also then be going to a far edge server within a cloud environment. And so thinking about how you're securing each one of those and how you're maintaining integrity of the who you're talking to and what data is transacting is really important. So we think about identity and access management as absolutely fundamental to ensuring that you know who you are talking to and what they are eligible to see or receive when it comes to data. And that could be an employee accessing critical information or critical data. That could be a constituent trying to receive services and entering possibly a social security number into a digital system. So having confidence that that person is who they say they are, and then ensuring that you are having a trusted internet connection so that the data that is transacting over that connection is a trusted connection and the data is encrypted at rest and in transit. And then when you think about your cloud applications, sometimes people think, oh, well, it's in the cloud, it's somebody else's problem. You've got to ask those questions of, okay, so what type of cloud environment is that sitting on? If it's a public cloud, what types of certifications does that application have within that environment? So being knowledgeable about the type of data that's going to move across the network, and then where your underlying providers are within their security posture based on what data is going to be moving across that network is absolutely crucial to make sure that you aren't one of those people when you open up the newspaper and see tomorrow's ransomware attack.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of good questions for government organizations to be asking right now. Well, Maggie Hallbach, I really appreciate your time and sharing your thoughts with us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Zach. It was a pleasure.
And special thanks to Verizon for making this conversation possible. Please join us again soon for another government technology virtual Q&A. Thanks so much.